All right, so today we're going to divide by decimals, or divide two decimals, or divide one decimal by another number, or vice versa. And again, I want to make sure that you understand, why we do what we're doing. So we're going to look at this first of all. Just look at the first slide that you have. It says when you divide two numbers, you can multiply both numbers by the same power of 10 without changing the final answer. And this goes back to the idea, I'm just going to kind of put this up at the top, and I want to see this on your paper tomorrow. Let's say I have the number 2/3, okay, that really means 2 divided by 3. We talked about that the other day. And that also means 2 divided by 3 written this way. They all mean the same thing. And when I have my fraction written like this, it's the easiest way to see. If I want to make that fraction an equivalent fraction, and I want to have a denominator of 30, then I can multiply by 10 over 10, and I get 20 over 30. I have not changed how much stuff I have there. If it's a candy bar, if I have 2/3 of a candy bar, 20 out of 30 pieces is the same as 2 out of 3. The only difference is we've cut each of these pieces into 10 pieces. So we have 30 here, and we have 20 up here. So it's the same amount of candy bar, it's just that we have them in littler pieces. Okay, so with that in mind, knowing that we can multiply the same number in the numerator and denominator, which means I could multiply 10 here and 10 here, 20 divided by 30, I get the same answer, or I can have multiply by 10 here and 10 here. 20 divided by 30, I get the same answer. So we're going to, since we have two decimals, we're going to multiply them both by 10. When I multiply 6/10 by 10, I get 6. When I multiply 3/10 by 10, I get 3. And 6/10 divided by 3/10, if you would do that on your calculator, you're going to get the answer of 2. And if you take 6 divided by 3, you're also going to get 2. So you're going to get the same answer. So it's okay as long as you do it to both numbers that you're dividing. And that's what it says at the bottom of your paper, basically. So now we're going to go on and we're going to do an example. And we're going to start out with 8 and 28/100ths, and we're going to divide that by 4.6. Now you have got to remember, this is the number that goes in the little house, the little division house. Okay, so we're going to, before we do that though, this goes in the division house, this is what I'm dividing by. I want this number right here, and that's called the divisor. I want this to be not a decimal. It doesn't matter if the number inside the house is, but I want that not to be a decimal. So if I move this decimal point over 1, that's like multiplying this by 10. And if I move this over 1, that's like multiplying this by 10. So if I do it to both of them, it's okay. I'll get the right answer. I get the same answer either way, if I did it on the calculator or however. So when I do that, I have 82 now 0.8, when I multiply that by 10, divided by 46. Now, when I put that inside the little division house, the 82.8 is the dividend, 46 is the divisor. And now notice the divisor, V-I-S-O-R, I can't spell that right, has no decimals in it, okay? So now, when we go to divide, it's going to be a whole lot easier. So I'm going to say 46 goes into 82 once, so 46 times 1 is 46, and then I subtract, and that's going to be 12 minus, and I have to borrow, so 12 minus 6 is 6, 7 minus 4 is 3. Then I have to bring down the 8. Now, you guys are going to have to fill in, because I left some blanks on your notes, just so you fill in so I can see that you're following along on the video. And now we're going to take 46 into 368. And that'll go 8 times. 8 times 6 is 48. Carry the 4. And then 8 times 4 is 32 plus 4. There's where we get the 36. And when I subtract, I get 0. So the answer is exactly 1 8/10, or 1.8. Okay, helpful hint down at the bottom. Multiply both numbers by the least power of 10 that will make the divisor an integer. Here's the divisor. And that's what you want to fill in the blank, the divisor. That's the number outside the little division house. That's what you're dividing this up into, this many pieces, 46 pieces, or 46 groups. Okay, so now I want you to try this one on your own. Okay, this will be your practice for you to do. And you're going to pause the video and do this problem and then come back and check your answer. Okay, now, I hope you noticed that it was a positive divided by a negative. And now I don't want my divisor here to be a decimal, so I'm going to move the decimal point over 2 places and 2 places. Now, if you want to, you could go ahead and do that in your original problem. You can put 8.48 divided by negative 1.75 and just move it here too, move it here too. That's from there. Okay, and that's okay if you want to do it that way and then do your division. Just in your book, they're doing it this way and then putting them inside, and that's okay too. Same thing. That's going to be like negative 175, and this is going to be 1,848. So I'm dividing 1,848 by negative 175. And I know now my answer is going to be negative. Don't forget that, because we have a negative divided by a positive. So we see, first of all, how many times 175, and we'll go into 184 once. So when we subtract, borrow there, and we get 14 minus 5 is 9. Bring down the 8. And then 175, can't divide 98 by 175, so we need to put down a 0, and you bring your decimal point up, bring a 0 down, and now 175 into 180, or 980 goes 5 times. We're going to subtract 875, because 5 times 5 is 25, carry the 2. 5 times 7 is 35, add the 2, and that's 37, carry the 3. And 5 times 1 is 5, plus the 3 is 8. And when I subtract, I get, borrow, get 10 minus 5 is 5, 7 minus 7 is 0, 9 minus 8 is 1. Bring down the last 0, and 6 times 175 is 1,050, so I end up with 0. And so it's 10 and 56 hundredths, and the answer is going to be negative because it's positive divided by negative. So you could just put your negative there and here's your answer. There it is down here. Okay, so now you're going to divide and you're going to estimate to check whether you did whether your answer is reasonable. So pause your video and do this one on your own, 4 divided by 1.25, and then come back and check. Okay, so when we do this one, we're taking 4 divided by 1.25, and I'm just going to do it this way. 1.25, I'm going to move my decimal point over 2 places here. Here's my understood decimal point, so I'm going to move it over 2 places here and add 2 zeros. So there's where my decimal point is if I need to move it up. So 125 into 400. Well, I know 2 times 125 is 250, 3 times 125, that'd be 375. So I know we can go 3 times. 3 times 5 is 15, carry the 1. 3 times 2 is 6, plus the 1 is 7. 3 times 1 is 3. So when I subtract, I can do that in my head, mental math. 400 divided, or subtract 375 is going to be 25. Now I'm going to bring down a 0. So 250. 250 divided by 125 is 2. So it's 3 and 2/10 because 2 times 125 is 250. And when I subtract, I get 0. So my answer is 3 and 2/10. There's no negatives, both positive, so my answer is going to be positive. Oh, and then it said estimate to make sure your answer is reasonable. So if we estimate, that's going to be 4, and we're just going to divide it by 1, because if I round that to the nearest whole number, it'd be 1, and 4 divided by 1 is 4, and that's pretty close to 3.2. The reason it's good to estimate here is because if I'd put my decimal point in the wrong place, and maybe I got an answer of 32 or 0.3, whatever, I know that 32 or 0.3 can't be right. It's 4 is the estimate. So it's got to be somewhere close to 4, and 3 is close to 4. All right, so our last problem, I'm going to skip right through that one, and it won't let me. Okay, so I'm just going to bam, bam. There we go. So Jace took a trip in which he drove 350 miles. During the trip, his truck used 12.5 gallons of gas. What is his truck's gas mileage? And there's a little hint down there for you. To calculate miles per gallon, divide the number of miles driven by the number of gallons. And the way I like to think of that, okay, let's say this is the miles you drove. And we want to know the number of gallons we used each mile. So if we drove 3 miles, this would be 1, 2, 3, and we want to know how many gallons we used for this mile, how many gallons we used for this mile, how many gallons we used for this mile. So, if we take these miles and divide it, by the number of gallons we have, we'll be able to tell how many gallons this is for this mile. If you take the total gallons and divide it into 3 sections, we'll know how many gallons are here, it'll be equal here and equal here. So, we've got 12.5 gallons, he went 350 miles, and we want to know what his gas mileage was. So why don't you pause the video and try this on your own, and then we'll come back and check it. All right, so we're back, and we're going to take 350 miles, and we're going to divide that by 12.5 gallons, which means I'm going to move my decimal point 1 place here. My decimal point's understood to be here, so I'm going to move it 1 and put in a 0. So I'm seeing how many times 125 will go into 350. Well, if I go 2, that's 250. If I go 3, that would be 375, so I can only go 2, because 375 would be too much. So that's going to be 250. When I subtract, I get 100, and I bring down my other 0, so I'm going to bring my decimal point up, and I'm taking 125 into 1,000, and if I go, let's try 8. So if I go 8 times 5, that's 40, carry the 4. 8 times 2 is 16, plus 4 is 20, carry the 2. 8 times 1 is 8, plus 2 is 10. So when I subtract, I get 0. So it's 2.8 gallons. I'm sorry, not gallons, miles per gallon. So for every 2.8 miles he goes, they use 1 gallon of gas. Okay, so that's the end of the video, and so make sure that you've got all of your notes completed and you've filled in the blanks where it needs to, and we'll see you tomorrow. Have a good day, or good evening.